Geshe Bandrachum, Yanda Wanzobe Sanje Riva Nashan Deoresha Banji de Jambaji Wonde Kanojo. Lana Meva Lana Menanje Demba Sanje Shumde. Bejawa Shaja to Bala Chasin Machedo Jamsu. Demba Jumden de Shin Bandrachum Bayanda. Zobe Sanje Riva Nashan Demba Deoresha. Jiden Jambaji Wonde Kanojo Lana Me. Tada Menanje Demba Sanje Shumden de Bejo. Shaja to Bala Chasin Machedo Jamsu. Demba Jumden de Shin Bandrachum Bayanda. Zobe Sanje Riva Nashan Demba Deoresha. Jiden Jamba Jivan de Kano Java, Lana Meva, Lana Menanje, Sanje Jumden de Bejava, Shaja to Mala Chatin. Chedo Jazu or Kanse Kanyo, Zoa Jatam, Sajan de Nakamba de Nanan Jiden de Na Georges on Tezekava Jima Sansa. Namda Gunga Chato Susan, Vajisha to Seke Pumbot. Chaban Jiden Sumna Meva Gumbo Chonye Jama Chatin. 现在的嘛，前面的微些生动着我就么啥子，你这件的是吧？什么今年没健身什么啥子，公布出这些的，他们这前边电报告说那么有点叫做现的新鲜嘛啥子，他边的是条完全给外面送的这些，绝对他们说的，新疆就那啥子，我真的这边那样的，老瓦大那上对的，新疆当把云南的跟着那样啥子，的关系也没。 Yawa Kunson Soba Rangi Sende Yonzo, Tende Sanje Temba. Kamara Rimama, the Yomasa, Sugar, the Melano, the Gina. The Shishan on the Trata, Sonam Dia, Tom Jeseba. Quantum Nejin, the Gadan, Chira Logic, Sivezon, and one Jova.
To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond,
the
fully destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct. Sugata no the word, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the complete and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the secure from the Shakya I prostrate and offerings and call for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct. Sugata no of the word, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct. Sugata no other word, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When the supreme among humans you are born on this earth, you paced our seven strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then I prostrate. With the pure bodies formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, win out the best, to you I prostrate. With the supreme science, space like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the teacher having all understanding, the field of with the qualities like a vast ocean, to you the one gone to the darkness I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtue which frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to that Dharma which pacifies I prostrate. Those who are liberated and also show the path to liberation, the holy few qualified realization, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you the sublime community tending virtue I prostrate. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp,
an illusion,
a drop of dew or bubble,
a dream of flash of lightning or cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain rank or both seen, subdue the four thoughts, and be delivered from motion of suffering, of aging, sickness, and death. Sanje jana zoje jana no chanju ba do da ne ja zoje dage je zoje be sonum je rola pe je sanje do sanje jana zoje jana no chanju ba do da ne ja zoje dage je zoje be sonum je rola pe je sanje do sanje jana zoje jana no chanju ba do da ne ja zoje dage je zoje be sonum je rola pe je sanje do sanje jana zoje jana no chanju ba do da ne ja zoje dage je zoje be sonum je rola pe je sanje do I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Gede Pumba Dayana, Jadan Juba Jadu, Gede Pumba Namneja, Pumbesian Beverage, Dani Yuba Mayana, Davi Yuba, Dada Davi Shivajiran, Nanjimanian Zimeka, Dea Yuba Mayan. Nanjimanian Zimeka, come to one below. Now the children in the man, Dada the Gajas, Yavan Bagaj, the Zip and the Javase, let on your Mosebata, let on your Monamdo, Teta Julia, Javan, Tomani Java, Davajan, Dajujan, Damaja, Sanjanam Jadadan, Damega Major. Javajavan, the Sim Julian, Majeva, Chunin, the song. Tamja Yanda 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 Mimi Yanda Dinner Sanjay Jedemo, Shene Shemi Shiva, Javanan Jamajo, Namdo Medenta Deme, Tenet in the senior, Kana Denda Kanjama, Tender Shitting, Tele Shema, Mahisha, the Jishim, Sanjay Jedem Ganam, Temba to Zuba, Tunjimania Tademe, Shavamania Daman, Zozanja Namajuki, Nendula Jessica, Razanji Jishina, Temba Meda. Dada Shua Dada Shejabara, which was Joja, Kangi, the General Government, Chevameva, Tomeva, Tade the Medicine, Giovanni Geshe, and Mozobe Sanja Manager, Batama Charles, hello. So maybe I still will read from the page 154. We respond. So it says we respond. The passage from the word utter abandonment of the addictions, addicted suffering, up to disappearance are correct. So in the sutra, this the utter abandon of these suffering, the complete dispersal and purifications, eradications, detachment from desire and the cessations, pacifications, disappearance, disassociation from any other suffering, the non-projections of any further suffering, anything that is these very things is peace. So this in the sutra is sublime. It is like a completely dispensing with all aggregates, the eradications, the cyclic existence, detachment from the desire, and cessations are nirvana. So they're explaining the experience of the arhat once they reach nirvana. So then it says utter abandon of the sufferings. So now this is the kind of subject that debating between Siddhanta school and the Prasangika, Chandrakirti's and Nagarjuna's tradition. So the utter abandon of these sufferings, when the Buddha says utter abandonment of the sufferings, so the Siddhanta school and the Vaibhashika school thinks, so this is because of this line, the Arhat who has achieved liberation, but with this aggregate is liberation, but not nirvana. So nirvana is after, having abandoning this very aggregates. So now the Chandrakirti and Nagarjuna's traditions is utter abandonment of these sufferings. So this very condition of suffering has to be eradicated or abandoning. So when, there's a line that is saying that this very condition of suffering has to be abandoned in order for attain nirvana. So with this line, the interpretations from the Sautrantika school and Vaibhashika school saying, nirvana is something that you achieve after the death. So, and Nagarjuna's Chandrakirti is saying that this very condition of suffering has abandoning means, the very condition of suffering is referring to your aggregates, the arhats, at the present his 5 aggregates. So abandoning means, is because the arhat has, through the direct realization of emptiness, even that is, refuting or abandoning the intrinsic property of the aggregates. So total, abandoning the intrinsic property of the aggregates of the body, aggregates of the feeling and mental formations, the perceptions. Even the 5 aggregates are empty of intrinsic existence. So this is what it means in the Nagarjuna tradition. Once you totally, convince the mind that there is no intrinsic property of any 5 aggregates. So then you have the body, you have the feeling, but your aggregates are no longer as part of the condition of suffering. So later you can see. So this is why the Chandrakirtis will respond. The passage from the word sutra, utter abandonment of the addicted suffering up to disappearance are correct. It is clear that the assertions of the suffering subsumes the 5 appropriative aggregates, includes the 5 aggregates, appropriative aggregates. Here, the suffering means origin of suffering. That means is afflictive emotions. Something that is afflictive emotion is the real suffering, and something that goes under the force of the afflictive emotions is also known to be a condition of suffering. So now
now saying the origin of the suffering, the world, and so on. The world means life which is, existing, depending upon the perishable collective, the aggregates. So, Jigdens, I think, the mundane's life, or samsaric life, and conditional suffering, and the aggregates, the appropriative aggregates are, it's very kind of, it's like different names for one meaning. Or appropriative aggregates is also conditional suffering because this is appropriated by karma and afflictions. Therefore, it is conditional suffering. And the original suffering, which is the afflictive emotions, delusional mind, or also the actual cause of the suffering. Therefore, it is conditional suffering. And then the samsaric life, which is existing depending upon the perishable appropriated 5 aggregates. So these are all, because the, conditioned by one, conditioned by karma and afflictions. Therefore, it's a conditional suffering. So this is kind of, when the arhats, his body, feeling, perceptions are no longer under the force of the influence of the afflictive emotions or delusion mind, or it is not really, no longer it is under the force of the karma and afflictions. So therefore, the definition is not there. Definition of the condition of suffering is not with the arhats, the body, arhats feelings, arhats thoughts, arhat perceptions. So, which means why? Because the arhat is totally aware of the, totally aware of, the absence of intrinsic property of 5 aggregates. So then this utter abandoning means even the aggregates is no longer become the condition for the grasping of self. Even the 5 aggregates, for the ordinary people, having seen the body, having experienced the feeling, having experienced the perceptions of the eye consciousness, the air consciousness, all become direct condition for the grasping of self, I am. So the arhats, the body, feeling, perceptions, no longer be the condition for the grasping of self of persons. So therefore, utter abandonment of the addicted sufferings. So which means again saying that in Nagarjuna's traditions, whoever attained the liberations, while they're alive, while they're with their aggregates, with their body, feeling, so they still attain nirvana. So nirvana is no need to abandon your aggregate, your body. You don't have to die. So now they're saying that, usually the condition of suffering is known through the character of, the, afflictive emotions, something that is under the force, the influence of the afflictive emotion or afflictive emotion itself. So are the conditioned suffering. So it's no longer with the arhat's body, feeling, perceptions. So given the formulations of the 5 appropriated aggregates, although you hold these words as the given, you take the terms of the expressions in general to have usage as in specific sense. So let's say, generally, and most of the time, often the aggregates are known to be appropriate aggregates. So generally, or usually or normally, all the aggregates are under the influence of the afflictive emotions. Now you cannot generalize that to the arahats aggregates. Arahat aggregates are the aggregate. Therefore, it is appropriated aggregates. It is under the influence of the afflictive emotion that you cannot say that, right? Because all the aggregates are under the force of the influence of the afflictive emotions. So, taking the term, this expression general to have usage as in specific sense. Just so when you say the suffering is reference to these very addicted suffering, afflictive emotion means addicted. So this person translator always use the addicted suffering, which is referring to the afflictive emotions of the delusional mind. There is no reasonable evidence for connecting it with any specific meaning whatsoever. Means the arhat's body feeling has no reasonable evidence to connecting, to the afflictive emotions. So hence, when you do that, then in the context of the discussing experience of the non-creations of the very nature of the five aggregates, it is inappropriate for you to claim we are utilizing the general term in a specific sense. So the general in the particularly, generally, so generally the sentient beings, the animals live in the oceans. They breathe inside, breathe in the water. They can breathe in the water. That does not mean you can generalize that everything that live in the water, they can breathe in water. So the whales, they have to come up, to breathe. So like saying, yes, your body and all the sentient beings, their aggregates are appropriated aggregates. It is appropriated or designed, held by afflictive emotions. That does not mean the arahat has the aggregate. Therefore, arahat's aggregates are still under the influence of the afflictive emotions. So generally, animals who fly in the sky, they don't have teeth, but the bat has the teeth. You cannot say because it's a fly, therefore, fly in the sky, therefore they, shouldn't have a teeth. So it's like, this is generally all the appropriate aggregates are still under the influence of under the force of afflictive emotions, but the aggregates of the arhats are not under the influence of the afflictive emotions. And why? Because arhats, totally has repudiated or totally has abandoned the conditional suffering. Conditional suffering, not only the futures, present conditional suffering, as they have abandoned, because their mind has realized even the five aggregates are, completely absence of intrinsic property. So furthermore, if one does not accept this, accept that this general sense applies in the case when dependence on the aggregates is not relinquished, if one does not accept, so saying that, Arhat has a body, feeling, perceptions, they're aggregates, this must be the appropriate aggregates, it is under the born, under the karma and afflictions, therefore it is appropriate aggregates, therefore it is conditional suffering. If you don't accept like that, and you just kind of keep saying that arhats bodies are aggregates are still is a conditional suffering. Depends on the aggregates not relinquished, then you have not abandoned the conditional suffering. So if you have not abandoned the conditional suffering, you haven't reached the nirvana. Then there could be no nirvana. So this is the translator's edited, even with remainder, much less without, despite the creation of the non-creation of the addictions. So now they're saying, even that in Arhat has gained the wisdom that understands the suffering is not intrinsically existing, or they understand the emptiness of the suffering. At the moment, for if one does not accept the reality of the non-creation of the suffering at that moment as nirvana, so which means nirvana is not seen through or within the absence of intrinsic existence, right? So you think the nirvana is only experienced from the annihilation of the aggregates, only experience when you leave the body, right? So which means if you're not accepting that nirvana is only experienced in total absence of intrinsic existence, in emptiness. Then even though one may be free, so this is what I'm saying, that then even though one may be free from addictions, you're free from all the delusional mind and their seeds, you're free from that, since the bond of the desire and so forth have been interrupted still. So you think that you may have, eliminates much of those afflictive emotions that you understand, So because this, as long as there is the grasping of body, my feeling, my thought, and still there is interrupt, or there's still possible of space of generating desire, desire and attachment. Because your mind, you may think that your individual mind has free from afflictive emotions, but still, when there is the space, the grasping on my body, my feeling, so there must be, space for generating desire and attachment. Still, one would see that the cause of the futile view of the impermanent aggregates as I am. So, it is your mind is no longer free from attachment. There's always chances to develop the desire and attachment. So forth. Therefore, there would be no attainment of any such liberation at all. So as long as there's a grasping of body, feeling, plus perceptions, there's always, chances to develop or generating the grasping of I am.
Does it say just like that temporarily you can be free from afflictions? But,
So, yeah. Because this, Siddhantika school thinks that, that what is the real, delusion? What is the kind of the core of all these afflictive emotions? There says the grasping of independent I, independent I. So when you realize there is no independent I, then there is chances to, because of the because of the realizations of absence of independent I, that that become the remedy or the antidote for the afflictive emotions. So if you totally gain direct realization of absence of independent I, you may free from all the afflictive emotions. So this is what they think independent. And then we ask, so your understanding of the emptiness of I, which is saying that, no independent I. So it is implying no independent I has any implication of suggesting that, some kind of I am that exists within the aggregates. So then they say yes. The I am, the I or the person is not independent from the aggregates, but it is inherent with aggregates. So then the Chandrakirti Nagarjuna saying that, so as long as there is the grasping, intrinsic existence of I am with body, with feeling, with perceptions, why not? There is a chances to generate attachment and desire. And Shantideva and the guide to the Bodhisattvas, Shantideva says, says to the Sotantika schools, saying that you may think that by eliminating the viewing the independent I, you may think you have overcome all the afflictive emotions. But, because you have the grasping of self within the aggregates, so why not that attachments, drive from that particular view and like sneak in your mind. Commotion legitimates, like a thief, they sneak in your room, like as long as there is the grasping I am that is in here, inherent within the aggregates. So there's always, it's open door for the thief of the afflictive emotions to come.
Does that mean Suchantika believe that by removing this notion of independent I, they can attain some sort of freedom? But even that is not quite nirvana. You have to die to get into nirvana. There's two things there.
Yeah.
Oh.
So they think that nirvana and the freedom from afflictive emotions. The freedom from afflictive emotions, you can gain the freedom from afflictive emotions within this life, present life, while you're alive. But to nirvana, so this individual has to leave the body. So nirvana, because in the Buddha, in the sutra, he mentioned that what is the nirvanas, how you gain in nirvana. Buddha says, nirvana is disappearance of the afflictive emotion, the cause of suffering, purifications, and nuba, shiva yuva, pacifications of future, the birth and second existence. And not only that, this very condition of sufferings, without having abandoning, no nirvana can attain. So Sotantika school says, Buddha says, not only kind of going to, having stopped the future rebirth, even this, the birth that you have, you have the birth that you have due to the karma and the afflictions, this has to abandon. So, because this, statement in the sutra, so they think that nirvana is only achieved after the death. So Nagarjuna's the interpretations of the so in the statement in the sutra that says, without having abandoning this very condition of suffering, not only futures, this very condition of suffering. So no nirvana means without abandoning the definition, the whole condition of suffering within this aggregate. So, and there's no nirvana. So the arhat has already achieved that, because when the arhat overcome even the seed of the afflictive emotions, this aggregate is no longer under the influence of the afflictive emotions. So this is not this cannot be defined as the condition of suffering. So you cannot say because this aggregate is the condition of suffering, then all other aggregates are appropriative and under the influence of karma and afflictive emotions, and therefore arahats aggregate also must be under the influence of karma. No, you cannot say that. This is almost like saying that every bird that flies in the sky has no teeth, so there is no anything that flies with teeth. So now Nagarjuna is saying that two things: abandoning the condition of sufferings, the meaning of the condition of suffering is not there with the arhats, the aggregates. And second, and why the reason why arhat has no condition of suffering is because their mind is totally convinced, directly observing, total absence of intrinsic existing of, like aggregates, mind, the body, feeling, perceptions. They understand, they realize directly the absence of intrinsic existence. So far now, reality is non-creation of suffering at the moment at nirvana. Then even though one may be free from addictions, since the bond of the desire and so forth have been interrupted, still one would see that the cause of the futile view of impermanent aggregates as I am and exist, because the seeing that gives rise to, again, afflictive emotion like desire and so forth. Therefore, there would be no attainment of any such liberation at all. Consequently, it is irrational to assert that one is liberated under such circumstance. So it is illogical to think that there is some kind of arhat who is free, whose mind is free from all the afflictive emotion, but their mind is still tainted with this grasping of aggregates, my body, my feeling. So I think this is a little bit, still that, it is not free from all this, the context, trying to explain something, still not free from ambiguity, because there's a possible thing, that means arhat do not have the concept of my body, my feeling, my thought. So does that mean arhat forgot his language? So this maybe people can have this kind of doubt. And then this saying that the language and following, or the following of the word construct, language and its construct, its projections. So you are not really grasping in the construct of the languages, but you still can use the language, because as I mentioned that in the language, language is the word. Word is the kind of indicator. So kind of word is the indicator. What is indicating, and what is indicating is the projections. It indicates projections, and from the projections, people get the meaning from the projections. So here saying that, continuum. What is the continuum? The word is the continuum word projects what? Continuum projects, the word continuum projects the meaning, that meaning understood or kind of, take in different meanings. So some say the continuum, because it's a continuum, something is continuously existing, which some, they think, there's one kind of entity, single entity, repeatedly happening. So this can be understood from the word projections. And some say, someone who think really through the analyze is saying, in the reality, there is no such thing, such entity that could repeatedly exist. Because it is the nature of the impermanent, nothing can repeatedly existing. And then what the word continuums projects to you, although it seems the word is projecting there's something, some kind of entity that repeatedly happening, but it is not fit in the reality and logical, but we understand, we use this language for, one disappears, another happens. The seed ceases to exist, sprout, manifests. That ceases to exist, another sprout manifests. So that is, say, this is the, word continuum supposing, So then also the word languages, the word say, I am here, I am here. I am, I am strong, I'm weak, I am ill, I am cured. So pointing at the body, the language is saying that, there is indication of I existing within the body. Or I feel sad, I feel happy. So the word is indicating I still can exist within that feeling or, with that feeling. So, then we logically analyze how can there is the person in or within, aggregates, within the body. So inside the body or outside the body, within the moisture or within the heat or within the air or within the space. There is no possible of finding the existing of the person within the body, but language is indicating, yes, I am with that body or within that body. So language is just kind of, so it's kind of like, using the palm, and trying to, hold the water, So you're trying to hold the water with palm, but water is keep leaking. So language is like that, So irrational to assert that liberations under such circumstances under such circumstance, and under the mind, under the condition of, still there is some kind of intrinsic property of body, feeling, perceptions, intrinsic property of the basis for the I am, with the body feeling. Under that circumstance, it is impossible mind can attain nirvana. So now this is the stanzas number 9. Stanzas number 6. If the aggregates have not ceased, though the addictions cease or afflictive emotions cease, there is no nirvana. So this can be, presenting the standpoint of the Sudantic school, or you can also say, if the aggregates as the condition of suffering has not ceased, though afflictive emotions, no nirvana. So without having abandoning the condition of sufferings. Or you can say first in sentence number 1, first line is, if the aggregates have ceased, though addictions ceased. Aggregates not cease, the addiction cease. There is no nirvana. So as long as you have the appropriate aggregates, your mind is free from all the afflictive emotions, you haven't attained nirvana, which means right that this is the question, is the question. And when you have intrinsically ceased, only then will you be freed. So in the number 9 says, if you claim if the aggregates have not ceased, though the addictions cease, there is no nirvana. When here you have intrinsically ceased, only then, this is the translator's edit, only then will be freed. When you have, when here you have, when you hear you concept, when you have concept here, think about this is natural values. Kanga says, when you so like so that when you realize absence of intrinsic existence within the 5 aggregates, there you can attain nirvana. So the first question is, the opponent says, if the aggregate had not ceased, as long as you have aggregates, the appropriate aggregates, even though your mind is free from all the delusional mind, or even the seed of the delusional mind, you haven't reached nirvana. So then the answer for that is, so when you eliminate all the afflictive emotions within the absence of intrinsic existence of the five aggregates, so you attain nirvana. So which means the second line is saying, in order to attain nirvana, interest in nirvana, you don't have to leave the body, you don't have to die, because, there is, once your mind is totally, absorbs or the, meditative equipoise with the absence of intrinsic existence of the five aggregates, you are no longer in the condition, you're no longer in the condition that could generate any desire of attachment. So then it's and indirectly we're saying that as long as your mind is, grasped with the grasping of intrinsic property of body, feeling, perceptions, you are no longer attaining nirvana. So this is like when hears, kanse, te, tekawas, have intrinsically ceased. Only then will have freed. So yeah, that's the. So now this, when here you have intrinsically ceased, only then, when you have will be freed. Okay, which is incorrect. So those who perceive the aggregates as intrinsically real could not terminate the addictions. So as long as there is the grasping of intrinsic property in aggregates, you haven't really terminated all the afflictive emotions, which arises from that cause, afflictive emotions. Nor could they possibly terminate their aggregates, since those addiction or the afflictive emotions would exist, and those actions arises from the cause, would project their, evolutionary force, the gradual force of continuing life after life, many times is propelled, it continues, projects, many lives, because, there is, grasping intrinsic property in the body, feeling, perceptions, mental formations. Therefore, you have, in your mind, you have a perfect basis for intrinsic I to be exist. And there perfect basis for the I to stand substantially, So when there is perfect basis for the, the I to be substantial, I to be concrete and solid, and there is always karma. When there's always karma, there's always birth again and again. So how many times you die, and that many you have to born again, because you haven't cut the chain of this, the cyclic life. So project the evolutionary force, the continuum of the birth produces from the causal addictions. Causal addictions, the addiction is, the translated means as afflictive emotions. In evolutionary actions, the gradual actions would never reach final limit. So there is no end, you know. So if this continues happening, there is no end of the birth and death. So therefore, their liberations would not be possible. So now this whole kind of, in the critic, to the Sotanic schools, saying that with your view, with your the path, so there is no possible of attaining liberations, because not possible. Its nature being terminations of the aggregates. So yeah, its nature being the termination of the aggregates. Bisi tongmanyit. Pumun number chibe sinya thaba bisi do tewe na kewa said was its nature being the termination of the aggregates. The possible, its nature being the termination of the aggregates. Consequently, the insight into one's association with the future aggregates expressed in the pronouncement of such as life is over. So the association further now saying that, so with your belief, with your, referring to the Sotanic school and the Babeshka school, with your path, with your view of intrinsic property in aggregates, the 5 aggregates. So even you cannot say in the Arhat says, so from now on, I experience the exhaustions of the birth, the complete exhaustions of the birth. So that cannot be, relevant, no longer relevant with your point of views. Life is over would also be impossible. Hence, how could there be such destroyed subject? So, with believing in the intrinsic property with 5 aggregates, how can there be total eliminations of the afflictive emotion will be possible? So, having thereby demonstrated that the complete impossibility of liberation for the advocates of intrinsic real things by the reasoning already expressed. So Nagarjuna's made this statement to demonstrate the possibility of the liberation for the advocates of the voidness or the emptiness of intrinsic existence. So now saying Nagarjuna's Chandrakirti is saying that so liberation is only possible with the view that reveals the absence of intrinsic existence. So when you have some kind of belief, some kind of leaning towards that, there is some kind of intrinsic property in the 5 aggregates, with that view, you cannot attain liberations. Any questions? So I think here the argument from the Siddhantic school saying that, as long as you have these appropriated aggregates, so which simple means as long as you are alive, you're alive, you may attain the liberations, you may have successfully, cut the cause of the samsara, which is samsara in the future, you have stopped it. But samsara with this aggregate is still with you as a result of the karma and afflictions from the previous, cause and condition. So as long as this samsaric body is with you, you haven't really attained nirvana. But you can claim that you are free, your mind is free from all the delusional and even the seed of the delusions. So then says, and when this individual attained nirvana, after leaving this body, So then the Nagarjuna says, now your nirvana is not really directly, brought to you through the wisdom. It's rather it is the nirvana that is you have attained through annihilation of the aggregates. That is more kind of, the presentations of the nirvana is more like, by eliminating or annihilating the aggregates. And the less there's some kind of saying that is brought through the wisdom. And then the second that says, now this, and then we ask again the Siddhantic school, and what makes you think nirvana has to be attained after the death? What makes you think that? And then they says, so one reason is the, statement. The Buddha himself taught this teaching in the sutra, and the Buddha said, the first there's kind of the line saying that the arahats, they experience the exhaustions of the birth and the exhaustions of the birth in the futures, and then all the afflictive emotions and the conditional sufferings, in the nirvana, in the experience of nirvana, all the conditional sufferings dissolves, disappears, purified, pacified, So total, utter abandonment of the conditional suffering. So when this is how Buddha described the nirvana. So this descriptions is no longer found with the arahats, the aggregates, because total disappearance and purifications, dissolving and utter abandonment. So it is not there, So nirvana is, has to be. There is no other choice. There's no other options. The nirvana you can attain after having abandoning this very conditional suffering. Then the Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti were saying that, and how do you really define the conditional suffering? Normally when it says suffering which is under the conditions, so the name, in Sanskrit was dukkha, and the Tibetan translation is dungyalwa, dukkha and dungyalwa. So there's some kind of the characters, two syllable, dukkha. So then the translation in English is a conditional suffering. Suffering is not really, that suffering is not by nature, it is under the condition it is suffering. Under what condition it is suffering. So, and also I added the example like, the water being hot, boiling, is under the condition of it is hot. Under the conditional, it is hot. By nature, water is not hot. So under, flame, as long as this is the pot, on the stove, it's flaming. It's, there's a fire. So under that conditions, waters become the hot. Water is not by its own nature, it is hot. So when we hear the sound, the conditional suffering means the suffering that is under the conditional. Under what conditional it is experiencing the birth, aging, sickness, and death. So then it says, with this body, I experience the suffering of the birth, aging, and death, and the many other sufferings. And then it says, why with this body you have to experience that much suffering? Because this body is functioning under the condition of afflictive emotion and karma. So under the afflictive emotion and karma, with this body, I experience many kinds of suffering. So then it says, if you experience the suffering with this body under the condition of the afflictive emotions, once we cut, once we, relinquish that condition, the condition, once no longer there, and how do you really experience the suffering? When there is no conditioning for suffering. So this is the argument for the Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti, So Arhat, they have totally eliminates total abandonment of all the afflictive emotions and their seed. So then, how can they experience, under the influence of the karma and afflictive emotions, they experience any kind of suffering? When there is no condition for suffering, and how can this be conditional suffering? How can arhats, the aggregates, become the condition of suffering? Because there is no the afflictive emotions, the conditioning, influencing the force within the aggregates. So by definitions, the condition of suffering, the meaning is not fit with arhats, aggregates. So that is the one of the reasons Nagarjuna says. So that is almost like you're giving a name. Generally, most of the aggregates are condition of suffering. Therefore, arhat have same body, same feeling. Therefore, arhat should have condition of suffering. It's almost like in the community that you live, most of the people are vegetarians, and it says, how can someone who is non-vegetarian, because most of the communities are vegetarians, or how come it is someone become vegetarians as when all the peoples around him is vegetarian? So this is kind of like saying, you're just trying to bring the general descriptions with specific, condition. As I mentioned, like, most of the, birds, the things that fly in the sky have no tooth, right? No teeth. But how come the bat has teeth? So it's like, all the people, most of the people, universally, whoever have these conditions, this body and aggregates, they are under the influence of karma and afflictions. So that cannot be applied the same to the arhats aggregates. So by definition, arhats has the aggregates, but is no longer is appropriative aggregates, is no longer is conditioned suffering. then the Nagarjuna also says, not only that, this Arhat, in his mind, there is no any intrinsic property for, intrinsic property of body, feeling, perceptions, mental formations. And then says, what does that mean? So they don't have in their mind this kind of intrinsic property, for I to be existing, with body, with feeling, with perceptions, And then say, that is the main reason why they have eliminated even this present condition of suffering. And then the Nagarjuna also said, because of these very reasons, their mind is totally free from any slightly, even the sign of intrinsic existing of any entity in their mind. So that is the reason they have attained nirvana. They have no longer, under the influence of the karma and afflictions. So then the Nagarjuna also says, this is how we see that nirvana is possible while you're alive, But, as long as in your mind there is, my body, my feeling, my thought, my perceptions, my emotions. So some kind of the intrinsic property within the aggregates. So there's always in your mind, there's a ready to give rise, grasping what I am, because you have perfect ground for that, intrinsic I to be led. There is substantial I which can inhere with body, inhere with feeling. So with this circumstance, this individual, although you think he has freed all the afflictive emotions, but his mind is always the possible to interrupt by, any afflictive emotions attachment can sneak in.
So Chandrakirti and Vaibhashka believe that nirvana is attained after death. Does it mean they have something, a self, that attains the nirvana apart from body feeling?
Apart from embodiment.
Who's attaining the nirvana?
Yeah.
After death.
So they have no clue, because they, they kind of insist this is the only options they could imagine the nirvana after the death. Because if they says, the nirvana can be attained within, within the remainder or within these aggregates. So your aggregate is the condition of suffering. And Buddha says utter abandonment of the condition of suffering means you have to abandon even this very condition of suffering. Not just abandoning, it dissolves, disappears, purifies. Everything is there's no residue left.
Yeah. So when they say that you have to abandon this aggregates, means there's a separate self apart from this.
So this is why if there is liberations in nirvana, that has to be after having abandoned this body. Then you can say, who is there? Who is there to attain that nirvana? They say, I don't know. There's no, but that is nirvana. So it looks like their final nirvana is coming. There's some desire to, to annihilate the existing of the self. It's kind of a little bit like, kind of the informal is like suicidal thought. So if you don't, if you're not successfully making yourself non-existing, there's no nirvana. Yeah, this also kind of reminds some kind of non-Buddhist, non-Buddhist school. There's still Samkhya school according. Still something left over, like the self, the permanent self is still there, but the permanent self, which is no mind, no object. So there's still something, and some of the Vedantikas, some masters, they says, oh, when you attain nirvana, you're one with the universal. You disappears in this element, So you have no identity of yourself. So that is, they think it's nirvana, So I think the Siddhanta is really kind of going a little bit leaning towards that, You just disappears in the 5 elements.
Nagarjuna is saying that not only you can attain nirvana while you're alive, but you can only achieve nirvana while you're alive. You cannot obtain nirvana after death. Can you say that?
So once nirvana, here said Nagarjuna said nirvana, liberations, the end of the birth and second existing is the same. So, which means Nagarjuna saying you can attain nirvana means, so set freedom from the cause of the suffering. You have freedom. So the freedom does not, and there's no implication of after that, after that, after death, there is no life. So in the Mahayana traditions, most of the arhats, they're born in the, we call, maybe there's we call Tushita. So there is the Buddha in the form of, sometimes we say, Longzhou Zobiku. So there's the Buddha's, in the English translation, sometimes there's enjoyment, something like. So this particular Buddha in that kind of, in that pure realm, pure kind of, in the conditions, this Buddha, so the Bhumis, the Bodhisattvas and Arhat, they can have direct access. And the ordinary people and the other realms have no access to see him, no access to receive any teachings. So most of these Arhat, because they have no desire to come back in second existence. So they always go to that place. Or there is the Arhat, which in the text mentioned that some Arhats, after the dead body, they bury their body in a very secret place, and then their subtle consciousness remain within there for years and years in meditation. So in the Bodh Gaya, there's one place, the new place they found pilgrimage, Ruchakan. And people, now this is new, people just, I'm not sure. Someone has discovered or some just, projects things, because there's in the history of the Buddha there says Kashyapa, the Arhat Kashyapa, he buried his body in a very there's a rock, big, and then Buddha says this body will reveal, and then during next Buddha. And the next Buddha will start teaching from this Vaishnava's body. So when there are according to those mysteries, in the text, Mayan, a particular Mayan text, it says there are many, like even the Rahul, the Buddha Shakyamuni's son, he's still in that state, And some arhat, they do, use their body and keep it secret. And then they send so many emanations in different places, the benefits, in the wisdom form.
When you talk about this kind of arhat in this term, is a little different from when we call Buddha Shakyamuni arhat. We also call him arhat.
Yeah, arhat, yeah. He is not just arhat, is enlightened,
But both the term applies to him.
Yeah, the fourth destroyer is meaning definition of arhat. One who destroys all the afflictive emotions. So four destroyers. So arhat is one who has destroyed all the afflictive emotion and seed. So enlightened Buddha, Buddhahood or enlightenment is not only eliminating the seed, even the habit, the imprints, the stain of the afflictive emotions. So this is why we always, when we praise to the Buddha, they're saying that you are free from the aggregates and the constituents and the element. So which means there's no any the kind of activity or the expressions from the habit. You do not act out of imprints. You do not act out of habits. But it's kind of very, it's Sonatic school, maybe it continues to when we discuss with Sonatic or Vivek school, and then particularly with relation to that, like non-Buddhist school who thinks that nirvana is once you are disappearance in the elements, you become one with elements. So they're kind of thinking that the forming of the aggregates is something to do with the karma and afflictions. So the energy collects the mass atoms, molecules in a form is something to do with some kind of karmic influence. In that case, and then all the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas, the 10 directions, the Buddhas, they should not have any form. Because we can say, Buddha's form body is, but if physically, when you think physical thing, there is the level that Buddha's form is, through the collection, mass collection of the particles and the elements and the molecules. And then what draws them into the form is the wisdom of the Buddha, So so the compassion, the wisdom realizing, single-pointed meditations, perfection of the generosities, patience, and bodhicittas, these has so much power to collect the form and sending the positive energies. So which means there still remain the unit of that individuals continue. It's not like otherwise, like nirvana is become, you totally forgot the existence of yourself. So this is more like like a faint, coma states, not knowing anything. So yeah, that's the so stanza number 10. When one discerned with precise intuitions, when one discerned with precise intuitions, what occurs the condition by misknowledge. So one does not experience anything, whether created or ceased, the birth or death, so arising or the disintegrations. So this is kind of, it's more like affirming that, with this wisdom that understands the absence of intrinsic existence, that understands perfectly, out of ignorance, there's the karma and afflictions. So out of ignorance, this is the wisdom that understands perfectly. So with this wisdom, anything the mind that is associated or kind of, underpinned with the wisdoms, don't see there's the suffering of the birth and the agings. So this is saying that, if your mind is completely, maybe you say overlap with understanding of the absence of intrinsic existence, or this mind is totally occupied with the wisdom that understands absence of intrinsic existence. So there is no any peace of mind, any slight peace of mind, which has no associated with the more, the wisdom realizing emptiness. So then, this mind cannot experience the suffering of the birth and aging and death. Because the very wisdoms, everything is absence of intrinsic existence. From that point of view, from in the face of that wisdoms, there is no such thing, birth and dying. Because ultimately, the death and the birth is not exist. Why? Because the birth and death is relatively exist. Because the birth and the death is not absolute and not ultimate. Is kind of something that is construct in your mind with, through the relations. The relation means, so you can perceive the birth with relation to the cause and effect. You can also perceive the death with relation to the cause and the effect. And ultimately, there is no such thing as the death that, objectively existing. So, for example, there is no, the birth of sprout, barley sprout that is objectively exists. Birth of the barley sprout is actually, related to the death of the barley seed. So there is no absolute, the birth of the barley sprout, without the death of the barley seed. There is no absolute, the birth of the yogurt, without the death of the milk. So the birth and the death is not two, like apple and orange, is not two different things. So therefore, it's not absolute. That is a relatively, and constructed as an entity, as a phenomenon, as an object, as a knowable object, as a conceivable object. If there is the birth and the death is something, absolute, something truly exists, and anything that birth should not be related to the death, So you cannot say the death of the seed is the birth of the sprout. This is almost like death of the Friday is the birth of the Saturday. So the Saturday birth is not, not absolute. It's not stand by itself because it is just named when there is the death of the Friday. So if the death of the Friday is also not absolute thing, it is not different from the birth of the Saturday. If the death is no different from birth, birth is no different from the death, why is it become a suffering? So death and birth is something conceptually constructed, distinctive two separate entities. And when something is coming, we have emotionally react. When death is coming, there's emotional react. So that emotional reactions, emotional, way of viewing, viewing that the, and the concept of the birth or the death, especially in the death is coming. And then you relate, you just, how's that? You characterize with so many things. Oh, that means, so I have to leave my family, my friends, my house, or my Apple Watch, my computer. Oh, how can I accept that, But you have no choice. And then this becomes suffering. So, by characterizing and having a solid target point and by characterize, and then it kind of, it kind of bring you in different world, something that while you're breathing, you are just separating from your everything, So kind of, while you're breathing, you are divorcing from things that you possess, So that's why it's kind of suffering, So when the birth and the death is, it's not absolute, it's not real, but it is relatively constructed, constructed within the mind. Constructed within the mind is, what the constructed within the mind means is made up in something imaginable, conceivable through the language and the letters. Then, it means to you something. It mattered to you, So that meaning, the meaning of the birth and death is only exists with relation to that interpretations, to that subject which construct. Like, for example, we have a smell and taste and the textures. The smell and taste and the textures is the smell that is existing, as long as there is, no sense power with no damage, no defects. So with that relations, you have smell. If there is no smell by itself, that you can, have it, with nose or without nose. So the meaning depth of is with this language, as long as you have interpretations, you are into that interpretation, and you have this. This has become the knowable, conceivable, is a real object. So absolutely, there is no something, there is no such thing as death and birth. So absolutely or ultimately, no colors, no smell, no taste, no textures. With relations with subject, with relations with the subject consciousness, with relations subject sense faculty, with relations to the contact or inner and outer element, yes, there's something to see as a color, something to hear as sound. Otherwise, blind persons, blind person may say, as although I cannot see the color, but it's my color. I'm going to take my own color, my portion of the colors. If you have no, during the COVID, so people, so cannot say, people says that I cannot taste the food. So, people says, you can say it. Although I cannot taste it, but the taste belongs to me, I'm going to carry it for myself. So there is no such thing, without this tongue, there is no taste that exists. Without observers, objects do not exist means, with relation to the subject, something seems to be existing. With observers, something seems to be existing. With measurement, your conceptual measurement, time seems to be existing. Time seems to be existing with clock, with the wall clock, with your watch, with your sun, sunrise and sunset. It's all indicates you, yes, the time exists there. Without the relations, without the relating with subject, there's no time exist. So, in the same thing, they're saying that death and birth is also like that, Hypothetically, if the death is existing and it is different from the birth, it's nothing to do with birth, it's death only. So then, some people, in the, they have born, but their previous life is not died, and they're waiting for the death of the previous life, so I can still breathe, So if this should be happening, right? If the death in the birth is independent, sometimes accidentally you born without died, you just born in new life, previous life is not dead yet. So you just, until he died, I cannot say anything. So it's kind of, language is so powerful. And, language is always, constructs many conceivable, imaginable object. So every time the language construct, the any conceivable, imaginable object, your mind, out of habit, you think they exist by their own essence. You don't realize this is how's that? What called? It's the conjurations conjured through the language and the thought. You don't realize that. You tend to think that yes, all of them exists out there. So as long as there's some kind of intrinsic property in every projections, and there is always concern, worry, excitement, is always there. Yeah. Judy's happy Loizzo. Oh, yeah. I forgot it's Judy's Loizzo. So no intrinsic Loizzo, but relatively Loizzo is there. So, yeah, sometimes we should really kind of carefully analyze, and then each of things that really matter to you, things that really concerning, you just analyze, examine, does it really exist, or I'm making it to be existing, or I just made up, you know. So there's some kind of, the mental constructs, some mental constructs, mental projections are the baseless mental projection. Some are mental projections are relative, because with base, you know. So the independent I, intrinsic I is the baseless. A relative I, generally the existing I am is with base. And like existing a forest and government and the nations is some base you construct. Anything that is happening or changing, movement, improving, decreasing, so based on something, so there's something that you can see and experience, you can touch. So you can say, I'm happy, I'm not happy, I'm full, I'm hungry, right? That I am, that although it is a mental construct, so that every time I'm talking about, expressing something about myself, it is based with something I can directly experience. So it's not a baseless mental projections. So we have, if we have thousands, millions, mental projections with base, we have billions and billions, baseless mental projections. Yeah, any questions? Okay, happy Losa, Tashidele. Chanju Simjo Rinpoche, Majebana, Jesuji, Gebanyamba, Mebanya, Kone Kondo Pebbles, Tonya Dawa Rinpoche, Majebana, Jesuji, Gebanyamba, Mebanya, Kone Kondo Pebbles, Pamasim Gentam, Deda Dejuji, and Rotam, Tato Toma, Chanju Simba Kama Sushu, Tadaguji, Molom Jubjuris, Carrera Veko Vishima, Pendan de Wama, Lujuvene, Jereson, Tintin Jazuji, Shabe, Side Badu, Denjuji.
May the precious body mind not yet born arise and grow. May the bone have no decline but increase forevermore. May the precious mind realizing emptiness not yet born arise and grow. May the bone have no decline but increase forevermore. Due to all these merits, may all father and mother sentient beings have all the happiness, and may all lower realms be empty forever. Wherever there are bodhisattvas, may all their prayers be accomplished immediately. In the sacred land surrounded by snow mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. O powerful transit in Yatsu, remain in this world until your samsara ends.
Thank you.